So at about 1:20 in the morning, I find myself going about 110 miles an hour with my lights going, lights meaning red and blue lights, and sirens going as well. I've gotten some really useful information from the dispatcher at this point. So let me back up and tell you a little bit about what's going on. So I'm a reserve deputy for the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. As a reserve deputy, I'm fully qualified in all law enforcement as regular full-time deputy is, except they don't pay me. I do it for fun. It's my hobby. Yeah, that's the response my wife gives me too. She's like, most people buy a fast car when they hit midlife crisis. I went and borrowed a fast car. Anyway, so I'm working an 8-hour shift that day. Typical shift is 12 hours. I'm working an 8-hour shift. I started on Saturday night. It is now about 1:20 on a Sunday morning, and I get off at 2 a.m. The reason I get off at 2 a.m. is because it allows me to go home and sleep for about 6 hours, jump up out of bed, and get ready so I can still go to church and have a fun day with my family, because I try not to let this work conflict too much with my family schedule. So I'm thinking, I'm getting off soon. As I'm driving down the road, 2-lane road, coming the opposite direction, I see a car change lanes without turn signal. Well, what's that tell me at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:15 in the morning on a Saturday? Somebody's been drinking. Have they? I don't know. But it gives me a reason to stop the car, right? But it's 1:15. I'm getting off at 2. I'm ignoring that car. Until as I get closer to that car, it's not changing lanes, it's doing this. So either the ship captain's driving, and he thinks he's in a storm, or we've got another issue. So I do a U-turn and come back around on that car. What I see as I'm traveling towards this car is not what I was hoping to see. What I was hoping to see is the glow of a cell phone in their face. That's not what I saw. I saw nothing in that car except more of this. So I call it in. As I call in this stop, excuse me, this isn't working. There we go. As I call in this stop, obviously not the same picture, that's daylight, I'm in the middle of the night. As I call in this stop, I say, dispatch, my location, 126 feet, 37, going northbound. I've got a blue Honda Civic, plate is 123 ABC. Not a big deal, do it all the time. I hear response back, clear. What does clear mean when dispatch tells me clear? Clear tells me my radio transmission is good. The key elements we need to know to help you in the future has been heard. One word tells me everything I need to know, okay? Clear. I then get on dispatch again. Vehicle is accelerating. Dispatch, are you declaring a pursuit? Yes, I'm declaring a pursuit. Give me the channel. Give me the channel means I hear a really loud tone in my ear across both my radios. That loud tone tells everyone in the entire county that there's something significant occurring to a police officer. In this case, it means there's a pursuit happening. I've declared a pursuit. I start calling out. I immediately tell them, I'm on this road, I'm still going northbound. As I'm going northbound, my current speed is 60 miles per hour and accelerating. I hear lots of radio traffic coming in. Radio traffic typically involving more people on the way. That's what I need. I need more people on the way. So I hear 2 or 3 people saying that. I hear one of them say, I'm at this location. I'm like, okay, they're probably going to catch me pretty quick. I'm only going 60 miles an hour. Oh wait, I'm going 75. Dispatch, current speed 75. They're still coming at me. They're still trying to catch up. So they finally catch up with me. As they're catching up with me, dispatch comes back. I've done a 28 on that vehicle and its owner. It comes back to a person who's a multiple felon. He's been in jail multiple times. He's been charged with attempted murder in the past. He's been charged with attacking police officers. He's been charged with fighting police officers. He's been charged with drug smuggling and drug trafficking. That's the person in the car that we're currently chasing. This is where the weirdness comes in. I'm happy at this point. This is exciting for me. This is great. I'm going to have a really good night now, assuming I get the backup I need. So I'm calling it out. As I'm calling it out, we're headed towards the next county. Next county becomes an issue now too, because the next county, the issue is first off, is there anybody in that county that's going to be able to help me chase him? See, here's the thing in vehicle pursuits. Do those cars look fast? They're not that fast. The difference is between that car, what I do in that car, and what somebody else does in their car that's running away from me, is the person in that car, this car here, I get a minimum of 16 hours training a year on how to drive fast. I know how to corner. I can out-corner you, guarantee it. Typically pursuits, if they don't actually stop, it's because they fall off the road, slide around, do something dumb. They stop themselves. All I'm doing is keeping up, okay? There's very rarely a circumstance when I need to do anything to force them to stop. You've seen all heard of the pit maneuver where you hit the back of the car and they do the little turn. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm just very disappointed in that. That's a policy that we can't follow. So we're continuing the speed. We're going more. So I want to read this off. Attempted murder, illegal firearms, drug dealing, assault on a police officer. He's got to be assumed armed and dangerous. That's what we're facing at this point. We're headed to the next county. Here's my problem with the next county. The next county means that if he turns off this main road, we're on a state road, 37. If you guys from around here, you know where 37 is. We're on a main road. I'm allowed to chase him on 37 on that state road until I run out of gas. No problem. But if he turns off that road, I have to give up the pursuit. Still my person I'm going to arrest, but I don't get to be there when we stop him. And the reason why I don't get to be there when we stop him is because when we turn off that main road, somebody else has to continue that pursuit. Guess what I hear in my ear a few seconds later? Madison County Sheriff, I'm fourth car in line. I need to move up. Policy says he needs to be second in line. Still my pursuit, he needs to be second in line. The reason he needs to be second in line, again, if they turn off the main road, my job is to block traffic, let him go. He knows the roads. He knows how to outturn him, and he knows the roads he's on. He knows every corner of that road because he's on it all the time. Chances are he's worked there 15, 20 years, right? I don't want him to turn. I want to keep chasing him, just for reference here. Luckily for me, he keeps going. As we continue the pursuit, we move into the next county. Or excuse me, I said that wrong. We were in Tipton County. Now we're in Madison County. You're sitting in Madison County right now, by the way. So now we're in Madison County. We're still chasing. By my reckoning at this point, I've still got 8 vehicles behind me. They're finally calling in. I'm starting to hear some stuff that's useful to me now. At this point, we're just chasing the guy. Okay? Useful things. I've got stop sticks at this location. I know where that location is. I'm still on 37. I know the state roads. Stop sticks are a good thing. And then I hear the greatest thing ever. And this is where it comes in, the greatest thing ever. K9 unit from Anderson en route. Why is K9 useful? We'll get to that in a minute. You're all smiling because you think you know. You may not know, and this is what's interesting about K9s. You may not actually know what the benefit of that K9 is. We're chasing the vehicle. Stop sticks. I see stop sticks. Now here's the thing I'm looking for when I come to stop sticks. I'm looking for the front of that policeman's vehicle. So as I'm driving forward, bad guy in front of me, we're going, do I see a police officer? I'm praying I don't see a police officer. Why? We're assuming he's armed and dangerous. Last thing we want him doing is taking pop shots at the police officer, getting ready to put stop sticks out. I don't see the police officer. I'm thrilled. I hear him on the radio. Now here's the other thing to keep in mind here. I'm hearing a police officer from 2 counties away talking on the radio in real time. How did that happen? Okay, let's just think about that for a minute. Okay, 2 counties away, completely different department. I've never met them before, but he's using tactics that I understand. He's doing things that make sense to me, and I hear him in his conversations. Okay, he gets on the radio. I slow down. I see his car. I know his stop sticks are somewhere. I create distance. Stop sticks successful. Both tires on the passenger side have been hit. Fantastic. So my speed up till that point was nearly 90 miles an hour. Okay? So I'm slowing down. He's still going. I speed back up. This is where I'm going 110 because I've had to create distance so I don't hit the stop sticks. Because, again, I want to catch him. I don't want to disable my vehicle so somebody else gets to catch him. Okay? This is my guy I want. Okay? So I'm following the rules here. I'm keeping back. Speed back up. Speed back up to 110. I realize he's not going almost 90 miles per hour anymore. Time for me to hit my brakes. So I hit my brakes real hard. He's dropped down about 50 miles an hour. He's doing this pretty dramatically as he's trying to keep his vehicle on his road because he's lost 2 tires on this side. See another police officer here, another set of stop sticks on the way. Perfect. Other set of stop sticks. He's moving, he's slowing down. We're going 25 miles per hour. We're going 15 miles per hour. We're starting to see lots of sparks. Lots and lots and lots of sparks. Front wheel drive still doing this. He's got no rubber left. He eventually stops the vehicle. Well, let me rephrase that. The vehicle eventually stops. He's still throwing sparks. He finally figures it out and stops. I pull up. I'm straddling the yellow line in my vehicle. I get out of my vehicle. I pull my gun. I do not go to that car. I pull my gun. I grab my PA. Within seconds, I've got another police officer on my passenger side door. I've got another car beside him. There's 2 people, one on each side of that door. And this is the thing. I start hearing a dog bark. This is good news. I hear a couple little yips, not too much. Then I hear that dog on the other side. And what I hear is this dog going nuts. I mean, just barking, 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 okay? Now, on the opposite side of me, I finally get the person that's there to protect me. The person on this side of me, right beside me, within an arm's length, He's got a long gun. Why is a long gun important? Because the guy's armed and dangerous. I've only got one hand on my gun because I'm holding a PA talking to the guy, telling him to stick his hands out the window, right? So as this guy's sticking it, as I'm talking to him, there's no response. As I'm looking around, just as I look around to this side, my sergeant comes up, okay? My stop. My sergeant's in command. He's the only person that's allowed to talk to me. I've got two people on the other side of those cars. I hear a dog over here barking, and I've got my protector on this side, because my protector, if he starts shooting, he's going to shoot back, and he's better equipped to do that with both the long gun and both hands available. Now let's talk about cybersecurity for a minute. So, let me tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Andrew Howard. As I said, I'm a deputy sheriff with Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. But I've only done that for 8 years. I've got more than 25 years experience in IT, and in those 25 years, I've spent almost 20 years in cybersecurity in some way, protecting people, protecting data. So about me, I protect people. That's the simplest thing that I do. So in my hobby, I protect people by being a deputy. I go to domestic abuse calls. I help find lost kids. I help. Did you know you can protect people while chasing a cow? Just so you know, that's something that can actually be done. And here's the reason why. Cows get on fast roads. People going fast don't want to hit cows. It's a really bad thing. So as a sheriff, I've chased my fair share of cows. But I protect people. Now in the IT world, that means that I'm protecting their data. I'm protecting their information. People will say, well, I protect businesses. No, I don't protect businesses, I protect people. I can't protect a business because a business doesn't really exist, but I protect the people. If a business does something bad and the entire staff is unemployed, that's a problem for those people, right? The business is just an entity that supports those people, okay? So I protect people. I work for a company called Asureti. Asureti protects data, and they protect the companies. So our group of people protect other groups of people, okay? So data protection is what I do. Data protection, so let me back up just a little bit. So data protection is what we do to protect people, to protect the people in those companies, okay? Now, during that pursuit, I was doing tactics and strategy both. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Here's a quote from Sun Tzu. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. What does that actually mean? Let's pull this apart just a little bit. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics means people aren't thinking at the front line doing the work. You've got solid strategy, okay? If you've got solid strategy, chances are you're going to win. You've got to have strategy to win, okay? If all you've got is tactics, you make a whole lot of racket before you lose. Okay? You see this in warfare. You see soldiers or groups of soldiers doing things like, why did you do it that way? It makes no sense. We do the same thing in cybersecurity. Sometimes it's because we're disconnected from what we're doing. Sometimes we don't realize what it is we're doing. But there is always a strategy element to cybersecurity. Now, over time, when I say over time, from my career, what I've seen is we do these tasks that make sense. So what's a task that makes sense in cybersecurity? Maybe having long passwords, right? Think that's a pretty good idea. Or maybe we force people to change the passwords often. Or maybe we don't give everybody domain admin accounts to an entire network. That's probably a good idea as well, okay? But are those rules that we live by, or are those just good ideas? The strategy would say those are rules we live by, and there's other rules as well. We tend to call those rules frameworks. So what is strategic cyber? So strategic cyber, some of those rules we were talking about, fall into a category of what's called GRC, okay? Everything I do as a professional. Now, my background is in tech, so I do tech. I started out as a computer programmer. I've done systems engineering. I've done network engineering. I've built wide-scale, cross-country WAN networks, things like that. But GRC are the rules I followed. So governance, risk, and compliance. So governance is what we do when we're putting together the rules of how we do things. Risk is the identification of how we write those rules, right? What's a risk we have? Well, said this morning in our opening session, a risk we have would be ransomware. How do we overcome ransomware? Well, we have rules that we follow. We train our people. We know how to respond to it. And the last thing is compliance. Compliance is interesting. Compliance means you're following somebody else's rules. Some examples of those rules would be privacy laws. So companies have to, for instance, comply with a law that says you can't just make all your customers' information open to the public, right? So that's a privacy law. Another compliance might be a federal law. If you're working for a government agency, they might have rules you have to comply with. Now, compliance is also internal rules. It may not be a law, it may be internal to your company, so you're complying with those rules. Another one that you comply with is banking industry. Banking industry has a lot of rules that technically aren't laws, but they just have rules. If you accept a credit card, you have to accept the rules that you've signed for that contract to accept a credit card. So that's what strategic cyber is. So strategic cyber is establishing the foundation through GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So my question to you guys, was the pursuit tactical or was it strategic? Or can you identify what's what? I'd love feedback on this one. So when I'm doing a vehicle pursuit, okay, is it a tactical thing or is it a strategic thing? I gave you a couple hints in my story, by the way.
I'd say tactical.
Okay.
Because it's one of several things you and your colleagues did to reach that overarching goal, which was to arrest that guy.
Okay.
So you pursued, and then there was the stop sticks, and then the county sheriffs coming in behind you, and then the canine unit. Those were all different tactics that were used to get that overarching strategy of stopping them.
Okay. Good.
I'd say it was more strategic. You're going by a strategy of keep them on the main road, use stop sticks, and then once you corner him, to use specific tactics to keep yourself safe.
Okay. So I'm going to say there's a little bit of both, but where I stopped the story, about 80 to 90% of what I did was strategy. Okay? Now strategy, what does that look like for me? So from a governance perspective, I have a policy, a book of policies that I have to follow. This is a sample of, this would be volume 1 on the sheriff's policies. There's actually 3 volumes. We don't typically see it in a printed out form, by the way. It's all digital nowadays. But those are the policies I've followed. Policies say things like, I'm not allowed to do a pit maneuver. Why am I not allowed to do a pit maneuver? Well, because my department has decided that that's too dangerous for the person we're chasing. So why is a pit maneuver important or not important for me? Well, the reason it's not important for me is because typically out in the middle of the county, I don't have a lot of traffic to deal with. So a pit maneuver isn't as important. It's not as important for me to stop somebody as quickly as, say, somebody in the middle of a city. In the middle of a city, they might turn a corner and go through a school crossing. You know, that's a real big issue. So most cities have policies that allow for pit maneuvers. We don't. So that's not an option for me. So that means that I can't stop him in that way. So my policy, my governance is telling me the things that I can do. The other thing, when I got out of the car, this is another hint I mentioned. When I got out of the car, I didn't go to that car, right? What's the downside to me going to that car?
You're putting yourself directly in like his line of sight and in harm's way rather than staying where you're more safe.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Very realistically, if he's got a gun, he's got a better angle at me because where are all the lights at in this situation?
Behind you.
Behind me as I move forward. So I might be able to see him, but he can really see me because once I get in front of the lights, it's a problem. Where I'm standing at behind all the lights, he just sees lights. I mean, you know, so, and I can see him really, really well because of all the lights. Another thing that happened is I mentioned something about having that second car. Why was that second car important? That second car behind me.
Because they can see your blind spots?
They can. The car behind me does a couple of different things. One is that's the secondary pursuit car. I need them to know the roads and to know what's going on. Interestingly enough, as soon as I have a second car, I stop talking on the radio. I should give no radio traffic at that point. And if I do give radio traffic, everybody knows that's an issue because I shouldn't be talking on the radio. I'm focused on the pursuit. Because if I miss a corner, I lose the pursuit. If the car behind me talking on the radio misses a corner, he goes into the ditch, and I still can maintain that pursuit. So if he's allowed to be distracted in some ways, I'm not. So in fact, what happens on a pursuit for me personally, I close my computer. My computer's off. In fact, the last time I was on a pursuit, I actually hit the button to turn off all my dash lights. I don't even know my own speed a lot of times. I'm focused on the car in front of me because the car behind me is telling them the speed. Okay? So that becomes policy. That becomes the things that we do that's governing us. Those things keep me safe. Had I not had that training and those rules in place, what would I have done? I would have done whatever I wanted. I would have thought, sounds good to me, let's go up and yank the guy out of the car. Right? Isn't that a bad idea? Now, let me ask you this. In that scenario that I gave you, what were the tools I had available to me that were most important? What were the most important tools?
I would say it's your radio.
Okay.
Able to talk with people, getting able to have all the information and know that you have backup.
Okay. Anything else? No suggestions?
Car. Can't follow.
Yeah, car kind of makes sense. So I'm surprised that anybody got these. Radio. I need to be able to communicate. Body cam. And my policies. 3 most important tools I have. My gun is the least important tool because I'm doing strategic work at this point. The gun is last resort. That's tactical tool, right? So I don't want to use tactical tools. Tactical tools mean I'm no longer in control. I have to defend myself because I don't use my gun unless I'm defending myself, right? I want to stay strategic in this. I don't want to have to rely on tactics. So I have my policies that keep me safe. My policies represent, what, 100 years of policing work? And things that make sense, things that don't make sense? My radio allows me to communicate. Perfect. I know what my people are doing around me. I know who's coming to help me. And I've got my body cam. Why is my body cam important? Besides the obvious, somebody can look at it later and make sure you didn't mess up. Any suggestions? I went back to this GRC. So my policy gives me governance, right? My radio allows me to know the risk and convey that risk. The compliance. This allows me to see, did I comply with the rules that I've been trained? Did I follow my policies? Did I make good decisions? I want this, okay? Every good police officer wants this. We all want this. We love this. This is good for us, okay? If there's any question about that, trust me, 99% of all police officers love body cams and they love our cameras. Now, from a GRC perspective, what does GRC look like inside a company, okay? Inside a company, this becomes really, really important. So I've mentioned, we're writing policy. GRC departments are writing policy, right? We are analyzing the risk that exists inside a company, okay? And then the last thing we're doing is we're using that compliance to follow rules. Whether those are corporate rules, whether those are laws out in the world, whether those are banking rules because of agreements we've made, whether that is literally, well, let's put it this way. You've signed a partnership agreement with another company. You have to abide by the rules of that partnership. That becomes an issue as well, right? That all falls under GRC. This is what a GRC program would typically look like, okay? We tend to call this, and I didn't say on the last slide, we tend to call this process managed assurance, okay? We're managing the GRC program. Policy. Policy program means writing the policy, annual updates, and awareness. What's awareness? Training. Policy content. Do we have all the content there? And then the standards mapping. Standards go back to that compliance. Have we taken all the rules we're supposed to follow? Are those reflected in policy? Do people know that those are there? Okay? I'm hitting these check marks. You can see these are the core components. Internal controls and programs. So a control is literally, you must change passwords every 90 days. That's a control. Are you making all your people change passwords every 90 days? Another one might be all staff. Well, here's a good one for HIPAA. All staff, you can't lock your computer in the trunk of your car when you go to the store. Well, why is that an issue? Well, if you have HIPAA information on that computer, it shouldn't be in the trunk of your car because it should be controlled, right? So now that's one I don't know if they've changed because that one in today's workday world, that may be an odd one, but I remember years ago that was one like one company I was at, like you cannot leave your computer in your car. If it's not at home, if it's not at the office, it better be with you, okay? So that was one of the rules they made. So audit and compliance. What is an audit? Can you tell me what an audit is?
It's where you investigate a company to see if they're following and complying with.
Yeah, and you have internal auditors and you have external auditors as well. But you have people that come in and audit that. You also have assessments. A lot of people use those terms interchangeably. But an assessment is something you would do to see, are we doing what we say we're supposed to be doing? Okay? Contractual obligations, that's the thing I mentioned before about you've got a partnership agreement, are you abiding by that? And then findings management. Findings are, oh look, we found out you're not doing what you said you're supposed to be doing, whether it's on a contract or whether it's on some sort of compliance, legal, law, whatever else it is. And last thing is our audit support. So audit support in the managed assurance, it's literally helping them audit. Most companies, they need something other than an internal auditor. They're getting some sort of certification, even if it's just a stamp. You know, somebody's done this, they're external, they've said this has been done. Okay, they want that from the outside, whether there's some sort of compliance rule that says they have to, or whether they just want to be an upstanding company and say, yeah, it's not just us saying it. You know, it's somebody else is saying this as well. So inside of this, so training obviously is something that needs to be done. Security services, this is advisory. This is advisory might be actually hiring a techie to come in and look at your infrastructure. You know, do you have people bringing in routers and sticking them on their desks and plugging it in so all their friends can, I don't know, connect, you know, things like that? Do you have these devices on your network that aren't supposed to be there? Can you identify every device on your network? You know, that's where that consulting comes in as well. Maturity assessments, just how far along are you? It's great to have an external company do that because you're not so myopic in what you see. You know, that's another thing as well. Privacy services, obviously there's a lot of, privacy is a very large subject. That could be obviously, many of these can be, but privacy is very large. DSAR response, if you do anything like with GDPR, which is out of Europe, a DSAR response is somebody saying, please update my data, please delete my data, please do something with the data you have about me. You have to give them a response, and legally it's like 45 days. If you don't give them a response, they can sue you. Like it's pretty straightforward. A lot of companies don't even realize that's a requirement they need to deal with because they're growing and they're moving into other markets and they have no idea if that's even an issue for them. They have no idea if that is an issue with them. And then third-party risk management. How many of us use a software as a service company? Anybody know what software as a service is? Do you have a Google account? You use software as a service company. Okay? So companies will actually go to their companies, their vendors, their suppliers. So I worked for a manufacturing company, and we manufactured stuff for Department of Defense, for Sony, for Apple. We manufactured for Jet Propulsion Labs. I mean, just name some big companies. Nestle, every single one of them, all the time, would send us stuff. Hey, answer these questions about how you're doing your work. So we would have to show them our policies, our audits, our assessments, how we're training our people. All of these things were things we had to do on a regular basis because we were their third party, okay? So that becomes an area of risk as well. This is what GRC looks like in the real world, okay? This is what it looks like to protect companies in the real world through GRC. So protecting companies is protecting people, right? So this is what we do for this GRC. So how important is GRC? So I would say that without doing the work of GRC, your entire cybersecurity program would fail. This matches what Sung Soo said, by the way. It's just going to fail. You will not successfully implement on a large-scale cybersecurity program without a GRC component. Now, whether you have a GRC component in name, actually as a separate department, or whether you have a GRC functions being accomplished within your cybersecurity department, I mean, is it being done or isn't it being done? That's where, for instance, having a maturity, go back here, this maturity assessments, that becomes very important because they can tell you, you know, are you doing the right thing or not? So GRC is that important, okay? Let me give you an example of this. The manufacturing company I worked for had locations in 83 countries. They had 33,000 employees, and they retained 60% of the market in their industry. So very big company, lots of things going on, okay? Sitting in a meeting one day, and we were doing training, and the training was on how do we establish the important things to do in our work. In that meeting was representatives from all of global information systems, which included GRC. The cybersecurity group, so the information security office, so the cybersecurity group, they basically admitted after a series of 4 questions, we have no idea what to work on next. It's basically what they said. I would put anybody in that table of about 20 people, any one of them on the list of probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. Any one of them. Some of them were younger in the industry, which you can kind of understand them saying that. Some of them have been in the industry as long as I had. Why are they saying they don't know what to do next? And the reason why is because inside their group, and those 16 people represented their entire group, which was a far larger number of people, they had a tower doing identity and access management. They had what they called a tower doing threat response. They had a tower doing red team work, or purple team work more likely. They called it red team, but it was purple team. They were doing purple team work. They had a group doing firewall analysis. So they had all these different groups doing this work. They weren't talking to each other. They knew they weren't talking to each other because they all had their silos. They were doing really good work with what they were doing. About 5 minutes into that conversation, somebody from that group looked at our table and said, they should tell us what to do, pointing at the GRC group. They're the people that maintain the risk logs. They're the people that know what's going on around the world in terms of risk to both physical security and data security, privacy. They're the ones that understand all of that. So what we figured out in that meeting, which was fantastic for us as a GRC group, because we were having problems with people really adopting the work we were doing. They knew we were doing good work, but we weren't necessarily being adopted well. Out of that meeting, it was completely revolutionary when it came down to, oh, wait a minute, we prioritize based on what they tell us to do. So they already have their list of things they know they need to do. I can see their list. It's a great list. Which one gets done first? GRC tells them that, because that's where the strategy comes in. Cybersecurity strategy is GRC. Keeping me alive when I'm on a vehicle pursuit, going after a bad guy who's likely to shoot me, is the GRC of the sheriff's office, the people writing the policy, the people training me, the people ensuring that I have the accurate training, the sergeant who knows all the rules and making sure I'm following them over here, which I'm glad he's there because this is a good thing for me to follow all those rules, right? It's the GRC that's doing that for us. So saving lives. GRC protects people, saves lives, and livelihoods. Livelihoods is important here. Another previous job I had, I worked for a not-for-profit company, and they handled retirements for 90% of them were retired pastors and ministry leaders. They had about $6 billion in assets. If I failed there, like truly failed there, how many lives are affected? I mean, these are retirees. This is a huge amount of money and a huge amount of lives that'll be affected, right? And the GRC, not just the cybersecurity, does that. Now, insight into that one, we didn't have a GRC department, and we failed. And we lost about $50,000, which $6 billion, not a huge loss. But the bigger thing we lost is we lost information for 24,000 people. Social security numbers, beneficiaries for accounts, HIPAA information. I mean, just like, we don't even know the scale at which we lost the information. There was a whole lot of attorney generals for a whole lot of states that did not like us, okay? So that becomes an issue. And basically what they did is they gave us rules. You need to do these rules, or else we're going to sue you. And they don't want to sue us because they recognize we're not-for-profit and we're helping people with retirement. Last thing they want to do is penalize us in some way, right? But their rules forced us to do the work of GRC because they recognized, whether they could articulate it or not, that GRC was the most important thing that we could do as a company to keep this from happening again. Where do we leave off? Oh, that's right. Okay, so we've got our guns pointed at this guy. We're calling him to come out of the car. He's not getting out of the car. I'm on the PA. Roll down your windows, stick your hands out the window. He's not responding. He's not responding. He's not responding. So in this scenario, the sergeant should be the only person talking to me. Sergeant tells me, we have no less than lethal. Now, in this case, what he's telling me is we don't have these cool little paintball guns that when they fire the paintballs, when they hit and they explode, they release OC gas, which is the same thing as pepper spray. Those things are awesome, by the way, because you can completely fill a car with gas, and no one wants to be in that car, okay? So that's awesome. They get right out, right? We have no access to that. He's like, we've got no access to that. And I'm like, okay. So I'm on the radio saying, we're going to send in the dog. We're going to send in the dog. Next thing I hear, it's not a bite dog. Did you know there's different types of dogs? Now, if you see a bloodhound, he's probably not going to bite you. He might lick you to death, but he's not going to bite you. But bloodhounds aren't bite dogs. Their goal is to find, to be honest, a lot of times kids. And in my area, it's autistic kids that we're finding with bloodhounds over and over and over again. Okay? In our department, we've got 2 of the best bloodhounds in the entire state. And our one bloodhound trainer teaches the FBI. Just put that in perspective. So, great bloodhounds. And we find autistic kids. That's what we do with them. The dogs that you see in the school sniffing all the lockers, they're not bite dogs. You don't want bite dogs in the school. Okay? Why do dogs bite? Here's a good question for you. Why do canines bite? Because it's part of the game. They don't dislike you. They don't want to hurt you. But they've been trained that biting is part of the fun game that they play. Okay? So it's just a fun game for them. Police dogs aren't mean. Biting is fun. Okay? So let's put that in perspective. So we think of mean dogs. They're not mean dogs. They're great dogs. But biting is fun. Your dog at home, let them chew on your hand. If you got a dog, let them chew on your hand, you go, when they're on your hand, they will immediately let go. Because they don't want to hurt you. Because dogs over a millennia have been trained not to hurt their masters, right? These dogs have been trained the exact opposite. I don't have a bite dog. I have a dog that sniffs for drugs at the police at the high schools. But here's the cool thing. I didn't know this until about an hour later. What he did is he took that dog's favorite squeaky toy and he threw it halfway between the cars. That dog was going nuts because he wanted his squeaky toy. The reason I keep hearing the barking is not because he wants to go in the car and bite. He wants the squeaky toy. Right? That's what the dog wants. Calling for the guy to get out of the car. Calling for the guy to get out of the car. He's not getting out of the car. He's not getting out of the car. We're thinking, okay, we're ready. The guy who protects me, he's saying, I'm ready to move forward. Okay, well, we're doing this. All of a sudden, hands come out the window. Fantastic. Hands come out the window. Okay, with your left hand, reach in, grab your keys, throw them out the window. Takes me a little while. He figures it out. Step out of the vehicle. He gets out of the vehicle. Walk backwards towards my voice. You've probably seen this. You know, they're doing this. We have them doing this thing. They're walking backwards. They're walking backwards towards my voice. As he's walking backwards, I put him back to a certain point. Then someone else starts talking to him. He goes in between the 2 cars. All right? At that point, here's the big question we have. Is there anybody else in the car? So I get on my PA, passenger, get out of the vehicle, passenger, get out of the vehicle. We do this for 2 minutes straight. Policy, making sure there's no one else in that vehicle. Okay? Then, when that's done, nobody else is getting out of the vehicle. I pull my door close, my 4 people, there's 4 of us, me and 3 others, 3 rifles, me with my gun, we move forward towards that car. Okay? We don't surround the car. We all go to the passenger side with all our lights in. If we surround the car and there's somebody in, what do our bullets do? They go at each other. Okay? We go to one side of the car. It's clear. We go to the back, there's a cover, we open the back, it's clear. Nobody's there. We're done. I never had to move to tactics. Tactics mean it's something I haven't practiced. It's an oh no moment. Tactics are what I use. I leverage my training to try to make the right decision in that moment. That's good tactics. I don't have to use tactics. I'm using strategy. I've been trained in the strategy to get this done. Okay? Now, end result here. He's very high. He really is. He's very high. He's on drugs. We found drugs in his car. He's got a 10-inch chef's knife right here in the side door of his car. He had a 9mm on this side within his reach. He had everything he needed. As I'm booking him and processing him, and he's starting to become more and more coherent as I'm speaking with him, I realized something. When he attacked the police officer that he got convicted for previously, the way they got him off the police officer, because he was high on drugs and he wasn't responding to things like kicking him and pepper spraying him and things like that, is they sent a dog in to bite him. The barking dog scared him enough he wanted to get out of the car because he didn't want to get bit again, because he played with dogs like that and he doesn't want dogs that play like that. So that's why I got out of the car, because tactics say we use all the tools we have. The most effective tool, my guess was at that moment, was to say, I'm going to send in a dog. And it actually worked, right? So it was a good end to that. This is my information. You're welcome to reach out to me, contact me, any questions. I'm local here to Indy. I live in Carmel, but I'm local here to this area. So any questions, anything you want to hear? We've got a little bit of time here. We've got about 10 minutes left. Anything at all? Okay.
So you work with GRC mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever work with the forensic side? cybersecurity?
Not really. I know what it takes to gather the information from forensics. I will say this, from a business perspective, because I've been through a couple breaches, I understand what it takes to lock down that information, lock down those servers and deliver that. From the law enforcement side, it's a different definition of what forensics is. We use the same word, but it's two different definitions, so it's pretty radically different, the way in which you do that. So I've actually done more with that, but one of the things I like about what I do with the sheriff's office is I don't think through computer stuff. I'm literally a patrol officer. I do almost nothing on computers. They call and ask me questions like, hey, my computer's not doing this. I'm like, you realize it's been 15 years since I've fixed a computer, call somebody else. So whether it's true or not, I don't want to fix computers. I'm avoiding computers when I'm doing that work. So, all right, so, but the point, to your point though, my forensics knowledge, even on that side, is collect the information, put it in a bag that doesn't let radio transmissions occur, and give it to somebody else. So, yeah. But that forensics is very important. And having the training, even if you're not a non-computer person in that scenario, actually makes arrests. I mean, that's how we... The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, they're the ones who do that training. That's very important training. And knowing how that functions is because I have a background in computers, I get put on those calls an awful lot because I understand what it means to collect that information. So.
Yeah, broad question. I'm a teacher at Southport High School, so I'm kind of against the grain compared to people. So I just want to know, like, any advice on, or maybe a good angle to approach kids that are broadly interested, you know, in cybersecurity, things like that. What's a good angle to start, or where maybe somewhere to push them to gather more information besides me, of course, learning more and do that for them?
I think the biggest thing for me for cybersecurity is a lot of people assume when they go into cybersecurity, it's computer science degree. It's not. It's just not. But they assume that that's where you start at. I would say 60% of the people that have jobs, I work in cybersecurity, don't have computer science degrees and don't actually do computer science either. So you've got project managers that specialize in cybersecurity. They have certifications in cybersecurity. Those certifications are not technical in nature. You know, so again, there's a very broad scope of things that need to be done in cybersecurity. What I would say is allow them, if people recognize that cybersecurity is something beyond, I'm in front of a computer, I'm a pen tester, I'm on the red team and I'm trying to hack stuff, or I'm on the blue team and I'm trying to, it's not just that. There's a lot more to cybersecurity. And again, going back to the strategy, kind of the point of this conversation is, you need people to write those rules. You know, I've got people in the office, at the sheriff's office, who have been there literally for 35 or 40 years. They're the ones that are doing the audits on those body cams. They have the experience necessary to know if I'm doing the right things or the wrong things. They're helping write the policies for what I do out there on the street. They are an integral part of the work that I do on the road. Even though they qualify with their handgun every year, I would not want them backing me up. It's just the reality of it. You know, they're not, and they recognize that too. But they also recognize that they're at a different point and they're doing things differently. So I would, anybody that potentially wants to work in cybersecurity, I would not emphasize the computer part of it as much as what you think you would need to. So a business management degree with a focus in cybersecurity will move you easily into GRC. And GRC is a requirement for cybersecurity. So. But you have to understand business. You have to understand the way businesses work. You have to understand the way they run. You have to understand what the departments are doing. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So you talked a lot about GRC,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you gave a very clear picture of what it is. I'm curious if you could speak a little more on like the true scope of it and like how far you've seen this used, or maybe like an example of like what is the thing furthest from what we would think of as cybersecurity.
Yeah, let me throw out two things. One is what you would call operational technologies. So those include SCADA systems used. So a SCADA system is a system used to manage, for instance, the electrical grid or the communications grid, things like that. So that falls into cybersecurity. Those are technical things. Another operational technology, so let me put this in perspective. So there's a hospital, and I won't name the hospital because it really doesn't matter, but there's a hospital here locally that they run Windows 98 machines on all their ultrasound equipment. Windows 98 machines on all their ultrasound equipment. Okay, why are they doing that? Well, because ultrasound machines are expensive, and the manufacturers that made the ultrasound machine said, here it is, it's one unit, and its operating system is Windows 98. And by the way, if you upgrade it, it'll no longer talk to the actual hardware anymore, and the ultrasound equipment won't work, it won't function anymore. That's an operational technology problem. Inside manufacturing world, you might find a piece of equipment like a computerized lathe or something like that that has the same problem. I found a lathe at the company I was at in Vietnam. There was 2 of them, and they were running Windows 3.1. But they spent $2 million on that machine when they bought it, and it still runs. I said, please disconnect it from the network, which they complained about, and I said, just use a USB drive. I know that's bad too, but just please disconnect it from your network, because I don't want the bad things on that machine telling all the other machines to do bad things, right? So that becomes an issue. So operational technology is another one. And one that a lot of people don't realize, and I actually had a little bit of a conversation with somebody this morning about this, is physical security. How much of physical security nowadays is a tech question? We've got cameras. We've got computer systems that run those cameras. We have the scanners on the doors. We might have some sort of biometrics in high security where we use a thumbprint or an eye print or whatever. Are we taking our security guards? Do they know how the technology works? Have they been trained in social engineering? Have they been trained on at least some concept of how this functions? I would put most physical security departments underneath GRC or information security management, because information security management, and I'll put this out, in Europe, the camera information is considered privacy information. So if that's completely separate from your IT infrastructure and all the camera systems, that's a SaaS system, and those guys that lock the doors take care of that. Well, you've got a security risk, a compliance risk, that you could lose 6% of your overall of your gross money every single year as a company if GDPR decides to say, hey, that camera's in the wrong place. You can't monitor your employees coming in and out by camera. That becomes a real issue. Are we even looking at that? So to answer your question, physical security is what I would put in there. So there's a couple others, this OT, SCADA stuff that a lot of people don't think about because it's not the computer in front of them. But the big thing is physical security. So the guys, in some countries it means the person carrying the gun. Some countries it means the person that clicks the little button to let them in the front door. But yeah.